Hey, welcome back to our daily devotion as we continue reading A View from the Zoo by Gary Richman. He worked in the LA Zoo during the 60s and 70s. Today's chapter is called What If? I have played the What If game since childhood. You have too, I'll bet. The real great players are blessed or cursed with active imaginations. In a group of people, what ifers are sure to be the ones who create the most enthusiasm or inspire the most fear. I began developing my skills when I was very young, and by the fifth grade, I was quite capable of what ifing with the best of them. My friend Doug and I had even what ifed our way into believing that there was a Bigfoot creature residing in the nearby canyon. Yes, sir, I am fully convinced that I was the what ifing um, at high school level, maybe even higher. What ifing carries with it awesome power. It is the power of suggestion. The power does not diminish as one gets older, it increases. By the time I had reached my 25th year of life, I had turned my what ifing into a science. If there were an Olympics for what ifers, I would have been in the decathlon. If there had been an Olympics of that type, it would have been held at the LA Zoo. That's where the best what ifers trained. If you would ever like to see them in training, visit the zoo at break time. They will what if like crazy for 15 minutes out of every 20 minutes of break time. I remember the day that a group of veteran keepers got together for what may be the finest single session of what ifing in the history of man. It was the summer of 1968. It was really warm for 10 o'clock in the morning, and the air was crystal clear, which was odd for Los Angeles. The heat brought more keepers than usual, who thought an ice cold soft drink might just hit the spot. We gathered at the North American snack bar and filled the cement picnic tables that circled the building. We enjoyed the shade and the fraternity. It didn't take long for the conversation to turn into a what if-ing session. Dawn got us started. Did you hear that some hermit has been sneaking into the zoo at night, crawling into the exhibits, and stealing food from the animals? Guy's nuts, I bet. What if a guy like that got a hold of a set of keys? He would let a lot of animals out in a short amount of time, Dale added. What if a guy like that got into the reptile house? Can you imagine what Griffith Park would be like with cobras and mambas and all sorts of vipers? You couldn't get anybody to come to the zoo for years. There'd be a big lawsuit if anybody got bit. You count on that. What if the guy let Bosco, the Buffalo, out? Cape Buffaloes have knocked box cars off train tracks in Africa. I'd hate to come into the zoo some morning and find Bosco looking at me. He charges the fence now. He charges the fence now. Can you imagine what fun he'd have? Really knocking around like people like beach balls? Did you ever watch him stand behind his fence and go into a rage? He trembles and salivates, moans and groans, and then he charges. I swear someday he won't have to wait to be let out. He's going to knock his fence down to come right through the side of the barn. That Bosco is something, all right. John decided it was his moment and spoke. Ivan's the one that gives me nightmares. What if some nutball let him out? We all got real quiet because John had just verbalized everybody's nightmare. Ivan the polar bear was the most feared animal at the zoo. John seized the opportunity to run with the moment he had created. I was here the day Ivan killed Nanchechka. She was a pretty bear. Ivan went right after her. That's just what he'd do to us, you know. John paused again for effect. Everybody stayed silent as they nursed their own private fears of Ivan. John resumed his manipulation. Bears don't kill you right off. All the keepers but one left break time glad that they didn't have to care for Ivan. Ivan's keeper was a little slow leaving the picnic tables, and he thought about Ivan all the way back to the elephant seal pool. That he was me. What made John's what if more effective was the fact that only days before one of the Kodiak bears had lifted his guillotine door and let all the other Kodiak bears out on exhibit just seconds after the keeper had finished cleaning. He'd be dead for sure if that bear had made his move any sooner. I wondered if Ivan could ever figure out how to open the door and let himself out. Jim was a relief keeper, and on the way back from the break, I had discovered that he had been assigned to help me with my string. I had been busy acid washing the elephant seal pool and was sadly behind. Ivan's exhibit had not been cleaned, and neither were the penguins and pelicans on exhibit. Al Franken asked me to clean Ivan's exhibit for you, he said. Uh, you were behind, and because of the acid washing, I know the routine, so you don't have to show me anything. Thanks, Jim. I owe you one. Don't mention it. Jim headed the polar bear moat and went to the pelagic bird exhibit. I remember that Jim had looked very impressed by John's dissertation, and it gave me an idea. Keepers are incurable practical jokers, and they specialized in scare jokes. I knew the cleaning routine for the polar bear moat backwards and forwards. I had performed it hundreds of times myself. Jim would just now be opening up the back door to the moat. He would prop the door open to ventilate the area and walk forward 5 steps to unlock the sliding door. He would pull it open and slide it shut again. He would turn and look at Ivan, who was already looking at him. He would be impressed by the size of Ivan's massive paws. Ivan weighed 950 pounds. He stood nearly 10 feet tall. He was 100% nightmare and never missed a chance to swipe at the keeper. Ivan was above all things a killer. Jim would lock the guillotine door handle into place so that no one could let Ivan out on him. Then he would open 3 more chain-link doors that would give him access to the outdoor exhibit. Ivan's pool was already drained, so Jim would grab the 1-inch hose, put on a high-pressure nozzle, and turn on the water. The surge of pressure would jar his arm, and the noise inside the grotto would be deafening. He would then drag the hose down the dimly lit hallway. He would pull it out into the morning sun and begin cleaning the exhibit. I timed it so that I was silently entering the back door just as Jim was beginning to clean. I stopped at the hose bib long enough to turn the hose on and off. It makes the guy outside think the hose is kinked, and he will give it a dynamic tug to relieve the problem. After doing that a couple of times, I proceeded to stalk my prey down the dimly lit hallway. All I had to do was follow the hose. As I crept up behind him, I could see that he was completely involved with this task. This was going to be easy. I stepped to within reach of my prey and let out a mighty roar. Now, polar bears don't roar. But even the finest keeper would have forgotten that fact under the circumstances. I simultaneously grabbed his shoulder and side. I had never seen anyone try to climb a high-pressure hose before, but that day I did. I'll have to give Jim credit for one thing. He never let go of the hose through all the animation that he achieved. Boy, was he angry. People sometimes get that way when you get them to abandon their dignity. Jim was a soft-spoken man, but he had said some words that I had never heard him say before or since. Jim had been set up to the negative power of suggestion. What-ifing had taken its toll. Because we are fallen creatures, we are prone to think negatively. Our what-ifing mechanisms turn inward usually create apprehension and fear. We become victims of our own thinking patterns. If we allow that to happen, we become cowards, too afraid to make a move, any move, for fear we might fail. Our imagination has the potential to extend our faith or destroy it. What-ifing prevented 2 million Israelites from entering the Promised Land. Joshua and Caleb believed God, but everyone else forgot that the Lord would fight for them. Their imaginations took over. Moses describes the effect of what-ifers in Deuteronomy 1:28-33. Whither are we going up? Our brethren have made our hearts melt, saying, the people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven, and moreover, we have seen the sons of Anakim there. Then I said to you, do not be in dread or afraid of them. The Lord your God, who goes before you, will himself fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt before your eyes, and in the wilderness, where you have seen how the Lord our God bore you, as a man bears his son, and all the ways that you went until you came to this place. Yet, in spite of this word, You did not believe the Lord your God, who went before you in this way to seek you out a place to pitch your tents, and fire by night to show you by what way you should go, and in the cloud by day. Gideon hesitated before his heroic acts by speculating that God might have left him. He was asking, what if God decides not to stay by my side? We have heard it said, a coward dies 1,000 deaths, a brave man just once. Romans 12 tells us that we should renew our minds, that we may prove what is the will of God. We must change our way of thinking so that it conforms to God's will. Negative. What if I share my faith in Christ with that person and they think I'm a fruitcake or a religious nut? Positive. What if I share my faith with that person? Maybe they will come to know him and find peace and joy and salvation. Negative. What if I said no? Maybe he'd think I was a prude. Maybe he wouldn't ask me out anymore. Positive. What if I said no? I'd keep my self-respect, and if he didn't ask me out again, God will provide better. What ifing is, in its negative context, nothing more than worry. And we are commanded not to worry. Philippians 4:6-7 says, have no anxiety about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which passes understanding, will keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. How do we change if we're worriers? And I am. It's a matter of forcing ourselves into new ways of thinking. Philippians 4:8 gives us a formula. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. But Lord, what if I can't? No excuses, my child. I will be with you. And that concludes today's daily devotion. And maybe in the comments down below, talk about maybe how you struggle with being a what-ifer and how you need God to help you overcome that. And we'll see you tomorrow as we finish out our week.